I was trying to overanalyze it and make it like the perfect trade, or try to see if it was a perfect trade or had a high probability of working out, instead of just trusting the strategy and taking the trade, right?
Welcome to the Think Profit Podcast. All information in this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not financial or health advice.
Hey, so Hugh, we have a question here from a trader who the question is, what would you do to change what would you change about your trading? And he says that he's he's too slow to act on his edges. So I've been too slow acting on my edges. So what comes to mind when you think about that? I wish we had a little bit more detail, but it's a very interesting way to look at trading, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a interesting way to put it. Slow to act on my edges. So just from my own personal experience, if I was slow in the past to act on a trade or a setup that I knew was already tested, then I either had a lot of doubt about, or I had doubt about the strategy still, or I was trying to overanalyze it and make it like the perfect trade, or try to see if it was a perfect trade, or had a high probability of working out, instead of just trusting the strategy and taking the trade, right? And oftentimes when you delay the entry like that, that's when you start to lose pips, especially on lower time frames. So that can be very detrimental to the system. But that's what comes to mind for me. How about you?
Yeah, it's really interesting because the other thing he says, his other big challenge is where to put stop loss and take profits.
Mm,
So it makes me think that there could be some hindsight bias going into this where he's saying that he feels like he's too slow to act, so he has an edge. In
mm,
other words, like a trade that he thinks is going to work out, and he doesn't really act on it, or he's too slow to act on it, and so he looks back and thinks, and I'm filling in a lot of blanks here, right? But it could be that he's looking back and saying, you know, I, uh, I should have done that earlier. I should have gotten in earlier, and that sort of thing. Um, because it's really interesting if the other interpretation would be that comes to mind, it would be like he he's watching a fast moving market, like a lower time frame market or
mm,
chart,
mm.
and and he's not he doesn't really know where to put his stop loss, and so he's kind of fluffing around and misses and feels like he misses on the really good trades that go immediately. He's missing out on that. So he needs more of a framework. But I agree with what you're saying. Like it really boils down to confidence and having a lot of those trades under his belt in terms of like using a simulator to get the data and understand what's going on here. So that that will also kind of wipe away some of the hindsight bias, because it's really easy to scroll back on your chart and say, well, here's a signal that I would have taken, here's one I probably wouldn't have taken, and that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, so using a simulator I think could really help him. But beyond that, he needs a framework of, okay, this is where my target is, this is where my stop loss is, or this is how I'm going to get out with my trailing exit rules, my exit rules, whatever they are, so that he and that really comes with repetition. So I think you've kind of nailed it. I think it's probably a confidence thing, and it probably is going to be easier to tackle that with literally like a printed out form that says this is how you take a trade, and even maybe a printout of a perfect buy and a perfect sell,
Mm.
and this is where everything goes, and then having those trades under your belt from a simulator so that you feel confident in that, because I think this trader possibly is doesn't have a firm system, and also doesn't um hasn't found an approach to wipe away the hindsight bias that we are all subject to. So yeah, that's what I would say about this one. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I think you hit the nail on the head with the probably not having a system. If he's asking about where to put stop losses and take profits,
Yeah.
then yeah, you just don't have a system there.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Walter.
Thank you.